activities and where to find those for adapting, and some organisations. These are great go-to resources. They're a year or two old, absolutely fabulous. I know the people who wrote these. I don't know if you know much about the background and things called the DECs, Development Education Groups. Somehow the Beacons group got some money and they've produced these guides. And they're straightforward introductions, facts, and UK policy. So of course, UK policy was always going to be dodgy, wasn't it? Because the people have changed. But they had to go. And so I recommend you have a look, first of all, at these really great kind of basic understanding about climate change education and what the facts are. Superb. I like these Bloomberg graphs. We will be talking over the next few months about what our activities are going to be. And they're super interactive graphs that really nail in terms of what's going on in terms of climate science and how it's related to CO2 emissions. So I do recommend those. Depending on whichever setting you're in, you can either have them on your mobile phone, you can, if you're at a festival, if you're at a woodcraft group, again, you can have them on a mobile phone or whatever. So they're super interactive. The Royal Society's got some good resources and policy work. So that's a good place to go to. Met Office. So they've got a couple of things. So just go back to that one. They've got some new resources. They've obviously got some funding, and they've got a whole suite of different things so they're completely on board. They're brilliant. I've got a little section here on campaigning and lobbying. There's some things by David Hicks, Climate Change Companion. He's got an interesting blog. The NEE blogs are good. That's the National Association for Environmental Education. There's one there from a head teacher and a couple of others as well. And they're constantly, so I'll say a little bit about the National Association for Environmental Education as well. The Woodcraft folk has got some parallel funding to work with, not with young engineers, and it's a much smaller amount of money, but you could be those people as well, that it's peer educators to work in schools, and the Association for Science Education is supporting that. So they have had, I don't know, epiphany, if you like, over the last couple of years. Their funding comes from a legacy, I believe, and they've decided to take that legacy money and put it out into organisations and schools. And we put a bid in last year. Anne helped me with that bid and helped me to look through the other bids. And so they funded us. We've got one of the largest pots of money, and that is also about going to festivals and working in schools. So I do recommend them as an organisation, and they really want to put their money where their mouth is. These are just some blogs. There's a climate curriculum petition, which has moved on a little bit now. The event I touched on Saturday, that's about the National Education Union, and also an organisation called SOS. There's a whole coalition now of NGOs and groups who are looking at a climate curriculum petition and how to teach about climate science education. I will send that link around. I want to spend a bit of time looking at the agenda for the day, because on your behalf, I spent the whole of my day at that conference, and it's good in parts. So I hate for you all to spend the whole day looking at it. I did touch on that before, but there's some great bits to that, which I do recommend you have a look at, but there are some bits that I wouldn't necessarily say that you should sit through. There's some more organisations here, always very useful to find out what they're doing. Again, NEE and WWF. SEED is our education, one of our, well, I suppose our, so in terms of the history and what's happened in terms of climate science and environmental education in England over the last 10 years, if you like, the baton was passed on to Seed. It's a charity. What happened 10 years ago was that government funding stopped in England for this agenda. And the Seed charity did some work on that, and there was a group called the Sustainable School Alliance. So I'd say one of the reasons why it's such a disparate, I don't know, set affair, if you like, in England is we don't have any civil servants really directly employed on this. In Scotland, it's very different. They've got a really big group called Learning for Sustainability in Scotland, award-winning group, masses of information. So we can all look at it, if you don't mind, Matthew. And so the situation in England, if you start working with young people, it is incredibly variable in terms of what's happening. Some schools will put some time into this work and others won't. And it's, you know, it's totally down to individuals at a school level. Some more resources here now. So NEE, they've also produced some curriculum guides. So the Beacon guides are brilliant. They're aimed at young adults. These are aimed at teachers. And what they've done is they've looked at the latest English national curriculum. Wherever there's anything on climate science and environmental education, they've done an audit and it's all there. So that's a useful thing to find out, say what an 11-year-old might know, and you can talk to them about that. The ASC bookshop has got a whole raft of different books. It's a funny little book about 12 years old called Phenology, Uncovered Nature and a Changing Climate. Is quite cheap now because it's old, but it's still great. And phenology is this interesting study. Don't get it mixed up with the one to do with brains and fascists. It's not that one. That's phenology. Oh, I've forgotten what that one is now. Anyway, so phenology is, for example, you've got some enthusiasts who have been cutting their grass at the same time of year for the last 50 years, and they've noticed changes in when their grass is cut. And there's all of those stories and graphs about it. So it's quite an interesting little book. Our international group, All Together Against Climate Change, they produce some resources. This has been updated now. There's a new program, isn't there, Paul, called Resist? And they're going to update that. What they would say about this one is that things have moved on and it's now different. It's not looking at individual changes, looking at system change and looking at climate justice. So they're going to change and look at climate science education with that in mind. There's some young people's resources. Tide has some great resources. That's a group set in the Midland, set in the West Midlands.
Was that ATACC? I think I was a part of that.
You were, yeah.
Yeah.
You was.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, All Together Against Climate Change.
That's right. And it just have some really great games in it, actually. And okay, putting it into a different context on climate justice, but the games are fabulous. And it's a really fun, entertaining way of looking at things. Lots of professionals, and I don't know if you agree with this, Anne, in terms of carbon calculator, apart from the one that we wrote for sea change, this is really great and easy to understand. And if we've not got anything that's bespoke and written for us, this is a super one to use. And The Guardian has a quick carbon calculator as well. So they're useful for your conversations with young people. A couple of great videos. Some of these links have come from a set of resources by a group called Carbon Literacy in Manchester. And they've spent a couple of years working full time and finding the best resources on climate science education. So this is just an eclectic mix, but quite a few have come from there. Like this one, for example, as well. And these graphics have come from there too. But they're all around. BBC 6 graphics that explain climate change. That's superb. And the Keeling curve. There we go. So when you find these graphs and where they come from, I've got links there, and this is the sources for those. Shift project, that's also good in terms of global CO2 emissions. Carbon brief, some great interactive maps, historical carbon emissions. This is an interesting one. First article was produced on August the 14th, 1912. Spark off some conversations with that one. Now, if, depending on where the project takes us, if you end up working with school children, homeschool, well, that is what's going on, isn't it? There are some ways of practically delivering issues about climate change, and the Royal Society of Chemistry has got some good stuff. Institute of Physics has got some good links there. Polar Explorer programme. This is on the STEM e-library, and they've repurposed lots of things for primary school education, but I think you can work these up to any age, to be frank. There's some really super resources on there, and that's a link to it, and that's a pack for that. So who knows what we'll be doing next summer, but if we are there in the field wanting to do things in the kids field with young people, they want practical activities, don't they? Matthew, you'll have found this. The best things that you did would have been practical, hands-on activities, wind turbines, different things, all kinds of stuff, and making it real to them. And then you can have more complex conversations with them if you can do some practical work at the same time. The STEM e-library, anyone can sign up to this, and there's lots of stuff. Here's a list created on climate science education in the STEM e-library. Again, some links to the ASE has some organisations that will help you. Couple of their journal articles. Mostly they are, and you will have found this, it's a membership group. At the moment, in theory, if you're not a member, you can go onto anything, but I'm not sure when that will end. Best practice guide, anyone can get onto that. That's been updated recently. And that is a really good list of links about environmental education and where to find information. These are out of date now, but if you look at the ASE at the moment on their, they've got some COVID-19 webinars, and you can look at those. We did one on a project I was working on called Urban Science, that's there, and sustainability. Geographical Association will periodically have information on climate science. Their case studies are brilliant. Eco Schools, obviously, anyone can look into their resources and have a look, I believe. They've got some great resources on there. Oxfam, their climate challenge resources are some of the best I've seen in terms of teaching about climate science. They're really, really based on sound pedagogy and how children learn, games based. So I recommend those. Practical action resources are absolutely brilliant. Again, not games based so much, but challenges. And they've just, they've got one on plastics recently, and they've got some really great stuff on climate change. Royal Geographical Society, Climate for Classrooms, climate change workshop resources, lots and lots of great stuff there. More there. And more. Don't know why the other link was blank. I apologise for that. I'll change the PowerPoint. But here's, they have a list of external climate change websites. Superb. This is a really old link, but I used it recently when I was teaching about climate science. They make the complex things really straightforward and easy to understand. It's still there. It was started up about 12 years ago, but it's still very good. And again, back to the carbon literacy project. So that's the presentation. In terms of, it's an eclectic mix of everything that I could find that was useful teaching about climate science. There is a very good presentation, a standalone presentation by a teacher at the conference on Saturday that's quite useful. But I think what we're saying is you need to find your own way with some critical friends. I just want to stop sharing for a moment. That's okay. Our time's up. There's a bit of time wasted. I'm sorry about that. So any questions now that you want to put in the chat or talk to me about?
Carry on, do you think?
Sorry?
Can we just carry on, do you think? We're not going to get cut off, are we?
I don't know. I'm not hosting, so I've no idea. Yeah, let's just carry on. Questions? Next steps, I'd say. Paul, next steps?
Next steps, yeah. I mean, we've got another couple of sessions in July, haven't we? But what we need to be doing from September onwards is deciding, well, recruiting more people from September and then deciding what we can actually deliver next year. Originally it was going to be Latitude in July. What Saul was saying is he's got links to Boomtown, and Boomtown wants us to do stuff in Boomtown. There's no reason why we can't do that as well. So it's deciding how we can do it. The focus of the Royal Academy of Engineering project is for us to do things in a kids field, so it's younger people. But as part of that, we will be training ourselves, so there's older people involved, and also the group night will be older people as well. So we have got this quite wide range of different audiences that we need to target, tailor our material for. And as we were saying in this session, the key thing is to be working with people with practical examples, so that they can really understand it and learn. So I think we have to take stock again after we've done these initial sessions in July, and then for everybody to decide what it is they want to deliver next year. So that's my 2 pence.
And Colin's made a good point in the chat. There is a lot of material around, and we need to definitely think about our audience. Yeah. What is our audience going to be in this changed world? I suppose
how is the audience decided? Are they self-selecting? Or do we get invitations to schools, or we invite groups to come to a, I mean, assuming that we're out of lockdown, you know, we can invite groups to come. And then who are they?
Yeah.
So originally the proposal was to work with a certain number of woodcraft folk groups and to work with the Latitude Festival. But since then, well, we should have been piloting this stuff next week in Henham at Latitude. Now that's not possible, so basically it's up to us to decide what changes we want to make to deliver a project that will still keep the Royal Academy of Engineering happy and be something that we want to do as well. So I'm assuming that the group nights work can still go ahead, either virtual or face-to-face. So we know we've got target audiences of pioneers or venturers. Probably Elfins as well, because it might be Elfins and pioneers that we find who are at the kids field in the festivals, if the festivals go ahead next year. But essentially it's up to us to decide what to do and how to do it. And yeah, so it's down to us. But once we start recruiting new people in September, we need to be clear on what we expect them to do. So between now and September, we need to decide what we think we should do.
Yeah.
As far as the Royal Academy is concerned, it's anywhere in the UK, I presume.
Yeah.
I'd say I'd just make a point, actually, something I forgot to say. Yeah, there's a whole lot of information there about climate science. But one of the key things that were with this project in the past was not just all of this information on climate science, but solutions. And it's, you know, you will see out there some conversations, if you like, publications, blogs about climate anxiety in young people. And that will happen, I think, if we don't have really good fluid conversations with them and talk to them about solutions. So I know that Paul's next session is looking at solutions. And I think that's, in terms of next steps, that's what we need to be having conversations about as well, and what we say to our young people at our festivals and in our group nights, and where we get that information from when we start to have these conversations with our young people, so that our solutions are based on the best science evidence and what we can do, because the solutions are out there. Do you want to say a bit more about that, Paul?
Well, it's just that the proposal was put together on the back of the climate emergency, and it was saying, look, there's a climate emergency out there. We don't just want to talk about it, we want to recommend practical actions. So it is very much trying to talk to people about what actions are necessary and how you might get those actions to be actually implemented. Yeah, so it is practical and
So,
There is, yeah, go on, Carrie.
I think we discussed it in the very first meeting, but the target, what's the kind of target of reach that was defined by the project?
Paul?
well, we're looking at a number of different things. So there's, first of all, it's to increase the engineering and increase the public awareness, knowledge of engineers. So it is us lot here all having a greater understanding of the need for public engagement and how to talk to people of different ages. Then there is trying to engage with young people about the role of engineering in a future society. So it's talking to young people about trying to encourage them to think about engineering as a career in the future, or if not as a career, just to be more aware of the role of engineering. And it's to do it in a fun, exciting, non-boring way. And because of COVID, then we have the ability to change what we're doing slightly. We've got to change because we can't be at the festivals with face-to-face. So we've got to come up with ways of increasing the knowledge of young engineers, graduate engineers, or people studying at university, and then also increasing the knowledge of young people to the role of future engineering in society. But just to say one other thing, it's very important that we're able to prove that we've actually been successful in some way. Hence, Deb's asking you all to fill in the questionnaire before you started, and then there'll be a questionnaire at the end so we can measure the differences. And then also, when we're dealing with the woodcraft groups or the other group of festivals, we will have to decide what's the best way of trying to measure the changes in people's knowledge and behaviour. So we might want to do a web-based questionnaire to get some quantitative information. We might want to interview people for a few minutes after they've had some engagement with us to try and understand qualitatively what they have gained from that experience. So evaluation is a key aspect of the project as well.
Would that be with questionnaires?
Yeah.
Web-based questionnaires.
Okay. Also, the chat's been disabled, but I was trying to write a message about, I think Vicky from Festival Public had been interested in us going to other festivals beyond just Latitude, like Download and Electric Picnic and like the other ones they organise. but that might have been more the car counting stuff. But I imagine that they'd be quite happy to have a larger facial elephant cohort there as well. So I think there are other festivals on the cards potentially.
That's true. Yeah. So there's from Robin, a balance between climate science, practical actions, campaigning, state corporate actions. There is a parallel project that's happening at the moment with IFM called Resist. And if things had been different this year, they would have been taking that project to Common Ground. And I know a really big important part of that project is climate justice. So I said little about that in my presentation, but I'd say that as a woodcraft group of organisation and group of volunteers, that's paramount with us as well. And in the presentation on Saturday that I shall send you links to, there's a superb, absolutely brilliant part of the programme was about climate justice, and all of the scientists talking were young women or BAME, Black, Asian majority, minority educators. So it was really, really interesting. And it's something that we need to be aware of, in terms of how we look at climate science. It's not just the direct science, but it's looking at climate justice as well. So that's another layer, isn't it?
I say it's Bob Dino. In the PDFs that were emailed, there was one document or one article that talked about sustainable development. And I thought that was really interesting, because basically, if you look at countries, they will have increasing demand, and that their energy requirements have to be met, but it has to be done in a sustainable way. And I look at what, say, we've talked about doing in the UK, and I think the UK could, if it met its climate targets, its carbon targets, it wouldn't actually stop the climate emergency happening, because the real changes have to take place in the developing countries, because that's where all the energy demand is going to come from in the future, and the expansion.
Yeah, absolutely.
And how that's achieved in a justice way, in a social justice way, allowing them to achieve the development that they need to achieve, but doing it in a way that doesn't destroy the environment, that's massively important. And I hope that in some way, this project, you can sort of link into that through maybe engineers working in an international sphere outside of the UK in the future, that type of thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's quite important in the UK as well, because we have targets to go down to zero carbon housing, for instance, depending on which party you are, 2030 to 2050. And yet we are still building houses that rely on fossil fuels. And so they've either got to be massively retrofitted in order to hit our targets, or even pulled down and built again, both of which is just mind-numbingly stupid. Because we should never be building houses that are 20, 30-year lifespan. Absolutely. It's such an inherent waste of energy. So yeah, it's quite an interesting kind of perspective. Is a lot of what I'm looking into is actually how do we retrofit, because that's more important in many ways than building new. Yeah.
Colin?
Well, I was going to say, I think in terms of the new builds or brownfield sort of, this thing of adapting offices and turning them into apartments. Now, there's a whole bundle of other questions about that, which I won't get into, but particularly new builds, the planning system is just, and Johnson is going to now drive a coach and horses through it by the sounds of it. And Greenfield's going to get taken away. We've got loads of issues in Sheffield where I live. Very small things, like a very small patch of land within about 200 meters of my house. I'm going to build 9 apartments with 9 parking spaces, 9 bicycle spaces, no solar PV. Oh, it's got a green roof, for the amenity of the neighborhood, but no rainwater collection.
Colin, some of my developments are in Sheffield. It's brilliant what they have to ask for.
locally active, because the council signs up to the climate emergency. And I think it's, this is like practically every council has done this. And then they don't do anything about it, and they give people carte blanche to build these out-of-date buildings that are basically 20th century.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I totally agree.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely what we should be talking about with our young people, isn't it? Yep.
And that's the sort of thing where their dad says, or their mum says, I've seen they're going to build some new flats on the corner of such and such a street. And then the kids say, oh, really? And are they doing, and then they can give them the solutions, that then maybe the parents who dislike the idea of densification can actually argue about green issues as well as just, we don't want that in our backyard.
Yeah. Oh, the issues of NIMBYs.
Yeah.
That is a daily battle for me. No, it's interesting you mentioned Sheffield, because one of our developments at work is the Kelham Island area in Sheffield, and the planning application I had to put together, we had to argue for double the number of bike spaces and 70% of the number of car spaces, and we had to really fight to actually get that accepted, which is bonkers.
At least they've blocked many of the roads now.
Yeah.
So you can't drive through. Yeah, the rat runs at least have been cut off. Yeah, it's a start.
Yeah, I agree. I think one of the most, there's obviously just the stuff, isn't there, about what's happening with climate change. Put that to one side for a moment. But I think what will be really powerful for this project is having some case studies for the things that Becky's talking about, things that you're talking about, Colin, things that Paul's talking about. So we have those to hand, and we have those on our Google Drive. We have them on a part of our website, maybe, so that we can link our young people up to them so they can see. And well, it's not really an alternate view, is it? Certainly some of the work I've been doing in Europe, and Paul's definitely been doing in Europe, it's just there and been happening for the last 10 years and progressing apace. Our little island doesn't see it.
I'm wondering if there's opportunities. I don't know about my company, and it's obviously any company right now due to COVID is probably not financially as secure as they normally are. But I wonder if I could get from my work a funding pot. It might only be a couple of hundred, but in exchange for that, we use my company as one of the case studies.
Yeah.
And a chunk of resources around it.
Is that okay, Paul?
Yeah, that sounds great. Yeah.
But that might be one way in which we actually can increase a funding pot for extra whatever activities.
Yeah. Well, that's right, isn't it? It's a bit weird. It's great that the Royal Academy wanted to re-energise this, but we have you've got a lot of questions, and it's difficult for any of the people who put the bid in to give answers at the moment, because it's just so, we should be out there having face-to-face conversations, but there are different ways of doing it, aren't there? And we are where we are, and we just got to find different ways of having conversations with young people. And I definitely think schools have almost become, to some extent, informal organisations, haven't they, in terms of their work at home. And they will be, secondary schools for sure, will be working from home in September for part of their time, for sure. And so having the things that we're doing available to teachers as well, I think is a good idea. So the kind of case studies, ideas about how to do things at home, where they can do some research, look into case studies, find out about alternate views. You've got this science, what on earth do we do about it? Well, this is what we can do about it. This is what other countries are doing about it. These are what some local authorities are doing about it. Because some local authorities are doing some brilliant work in the UK.
I wonder if there's thinking of activities. I wonder if part of what we should be looking at, given we've got so much more prep time before we hit another festival, is there any activities that we can put on Latitude's website in advance, remotely?
Yeah, we can ask Paul.
To do, and they could be like I've seen some really good Wikipedia treasure hunts that you can do online and link it to the Kids Field page on Latitude, so that when people come, they may well actually have seen, you know, and start of thinking about it already. It might help engage people before they then land. Obviously, we're talking about a festival that will happen in a year, and fingers crossed will still go ahead.
Is that a good conversation to have with Vicky, Saul and Paul?
Yeah.
You know that?
Yeah. I think they would be happy for that, because they have asked in the past for those sort of materials to be uploaded, and then we just haven't generally had all the resources to send them.
Yeah. Okay. I'll have a think.
Good.
Yeah, just think as wide as you can, you know, because as Sol was saying, it's not just Latitude, it could be Download and others as well. And the festival organisers want to be doing more, and they're very keen to work with us if that helps them appear to be doing more, even if we're doing it. So, yeah, great.
So,
oh, Colin, that's an interesting idea, yeah. It might be more like Minecraft, but
well,
yeah.
I'm thinking in the online context and getting people, you know, I'm not into this. I haven't got time to play games. You know, I used to when I was underemployed and bored, but I mean, that was like 15 years ago when they were like little men climbing up ladders, you know. But yeah, I mean, I believe, you know, some of them are just these action games where you just kill everybody and win the prize or something. But some of them are like this. Is this Sim City or something like that where you build?
That's what it's on. Yeah.
So if you could have something of that sort. I don't know if somebody out there's done this sort of thing already with green things.
Possibly.
It's the sort of thing that I thought the Greens would be into, but I don't know.
There is a game that's quite similar to SimCity, and it's about managing. You're the mayor of a city, but it's all about that. Like, there's a real heavy emphasis on transport, and you can set up all your bus and train routes and metro systems, and you get, you know, you can actually choose what you spend your public money on. Which has that additional layer beyond SimCity that would definitely be for an older teenagery upwards type remit. But yeah, that's proper nerdy into like the urban planning kind of end of things, which is why I'm aware of it. Yeah, that's a brilliant shout, because that's something that could engage people before the festival or afterwards. That is a different age group.
And some of these, I mean, I have friends who do, you know, Scrabble with 10 different components all at the same time online. But some of these things, again, you can work in teams or in a group, can't you? And it's not competitive. I mean, I'm sure it could be devised to be collaborative, which is the other emphasis perhaps we should have. This thing is not just about playing a game and winning, but it's about. And that's where the justice issue can come in, that in fact you can't win if you don't help the other guys. I mean, I play a very simple game.
Climate change version of Pandemic.
Just a decision-making game, you know. You can't win if you beat the other people. They have to get something. Not much necessarily, but
that's a very good point there, Becky. When not last Venture Camp, the one before, I don't know if things have moved on, but I know that Jack, who had a games cafe, was looking into some climate change games, and he did have some to show us. But do you think it'd be a massive open market? But they weren't great, the ones that we saw.
Which Jack?
Jack
Brown?
Yes, Jack Brown.
Cool. I know him. He was a DF with me.
So I think he would know if things have changed and got better, or what's available out there. So yeah, let's draw these people in. Do you know of any other better ones? I've used something called Play Decide, if you Google that. And if you can create an online game with issues and fact cards. I've just written one on plastics for that. So you could do a similar thing there. So that's an activity that could easily happen online, and you could use with groups and can control it.
What's that called, Margaret?
Play Decide.
Yeah, I've just done a quick Google actually, and there's different theoretical like articles on climate change and game theory.
Oh.
So that might be a good.
I think that's a bit different. That's economics. That's my
Oh,
stuff.
is it?
Yeah.
I'm not going to go into that.
Of being in a suboptimal minimum where you can't get out of the suboptimal condition because nobody trusts anybody else. Yeah, that's a different thing from economics. Yeah.
I mean, it does talk about games, but players make decisions about treaty ratification.
Yeah.
That's not what I hoped it was.
Yeah. That's like COP26, that's that level of stuff. Yeah. Just a quick thought. Sorry, I'm dominating, but I have my university that I teach at in Asia. Now we've got a problem because of travel, so I'm not going there in September. I may go back sometime in the spring of 2021. But we have a very big and strong computer science group. So actually, I wonder if I can contact some of my colleagues. I could actually get something programmed, possibly. But it would be a little, that would take a lot of development.
I don't know if the cat's been saved, but great idea.
I'll chase that up. We're on vacation for 2 months at the moment, but I'll chase that one up as a possibility.
Yeah.
Jumping back to the latitude thing and linking through to that, as we've got time till next year's latitude, is there room to talk to people about the carbon budget of latitude and justifying their own visit there and the cost of them going to latitude individually and what actions they should start to make to minimize that?
Paul, you've done
which is
some work
both
on
collective and individual.
Yeah, they've done quite a bit of work on that, and Peter Harper has done quite a lot of analysis for the Shambhala Festival as well. So there's the organisation called Julie's Bicycle, which is like the industry environmental organisation that supports the different festival organisers and producers, reports on how they can cut their carbon footprint. But, they're not going to want us to say the best thing to do is for people to stay at home and not go to the festival. So we just got to be careful about that.
Well, I mean, I remember I've had some good conversations with you, Anne, haven't I, about our woodcraft folk camps, and we can do a bit of nasal gazing about what we use at a camp, etc. And we have done some brilliant analysis in the past, but actually 2 weeks in the tent without the telly and our heating at home just always trumps, So I'm not sure about a music festival because that's entirely different in some respects.
Don't people still have their home though? So the heating in the fridge will probably still be running at home when they're away.
Not the heating, I hope.
Well, you don't know. Some might leave it on without thinking.
Well,
Anyway, I think I'm ready for my tea as well now. Time to bring it to a close, do you think? And
I think so.
And do you know what the next session is? Is that me?
No.
Does Annie know?
I think it's Paul, isn't it?
I think it's you, Paul. I think it's you. Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure that normal service will be resumed and Danny will have everything to hand, etc. And she must be distraught. And this happened. And I'm sad. Oh, you're here.
I'm having to do it separately on an iPad. So I've got Woodcraft Folk open and I'm here separately. But I'm so sorry. It's my work computer. Doesn't so it's not my internet, it's my work computer. So Saul, I think you were right. There's something I need to look at there. But the next session is Bob's session on the 22nd of July. That's the next one coming up. So yeah, thank you, Margaret. That's really, really interesting. I was desperate to try and get a hold of everything that was coming through, really broken and bitty. So I think it was a really useful, productive chat. And if you're happy, I can share the PowerPoint and the resources as well from today. Is that, yeah? I'll send those round.
Danny, I've realised when I've looked at it, there's some bits I want to tidy up before we have the final one saved on Google Docs, and I'll have a look at that tomorrow. I'm sorry about that. I'll just tidy up a few bits. And
So yeah, okay, no problem. I'm looking at whether we can get folders on Google Docs where we can put documents for everyone from sessions they're doing and getting those shared.
Yeah, a separate folder for each session would be perfect.
Yeah. Great. Oh, well, lovely. Okay, well, if there's are there any other questions for
Danny, at the last meeting, Deb said she was going to send around some publicity material so we could try and recruit other people, because we need to be recruiting more young engineers. Do you have information you can send round to us so that we can forward it on to try and get more people involved?
Yeah, I'll certainly have a look. I'm not sure, I haven't had those documents myself either. So I'll have a look and see if we have got them in the file for the project. And if I do, I'll send those round. But you're absolutely right. We do need to be recruiting some more people for the project.
Send us the invite for Bob's next session, because I don't appear to have that in the calendar.
Don't you? Okay. Yeah. I'll email that to you then. Has everybody else had that invite?
I think it's worth sending it again to everybody just in case.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Susie and I are in the middle of persuading another person to join us.
Excellent.
Who's based in York, and she works as a building physicist doing carbon calculations for a council.
Okay.
So
Great.
We need to capture all this, don't we? All these ideas on case studies, blogs. Yeah, I think.
Yeah, one of the things we said we'd do would be to produce social media related stuff. So at some point before September, we probably want to identify a number of different working groups or subgroups and get people working outside these meetings to try and use their skills to do different aspects of the project.
Yeah, that would be great.
It's also really good to have longer, like we have tonight, so that we can discuss things.
Yeah.
On Zoom,
the chat afterwards is just as valuable.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it was very good.
Great. All right. Well, thank you. I'm hoping this is recorded and will be available.
Who knows tonight? It will be different from now on.
Yeah. So I hope to get that technology sorted. And yeah, we'll meet all again on the 22nd.
Yeah, perfect.
That's great. All right. If there's any questions, we're going to get an email group together so that we can email as well. And I'll be getting in touch with you about induction meets and getting a WhatsApp group perhaps.
I was going to say WhatsApp will be really
Yes, I think so. Yeah.
Okay, well that's fantastic.
I pulled a face at that.
I have all notifications disabled on WhatsApp, so I only check it like once a month.
Yeah, it's not free. Yeah, you can opt out. Yeah.
So I will check it once a month, but I will be quite.
I was thinking that's quicker than email.
Pretty much.
Brilliant.
Great.
Right.
All right. Well, thank you. I'll end the meeting now.
All right. Okay. Thank you, Danny.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye, everybody. Bye.